Hey y'all, just wanted to hop on here and yap a little bit. Got a long drive, so I figured no better time. What I basically wanted to talk about a bit is kind of the disaster relief in regard to Hurricane Helene and kind of what's up with that. Because I see too many people on here talking like they're surprised that the government is inadequate at addressing this stuff. And it's like, man, hold on. This is the same government that right now is letting 1 in 4 people die of poverty and is conducting a genocide at the same time and entertaining a military-industrial complex, a medical-industrial complex. We got all that bullshit with student debt. You know, it's like this, the root of it is daggone neoliberal capitalism. There just ain't a better result that can happen. Like, there is not a better outcome available to our neighbors here and really to the world, because this is a global issue, that climate. And, naturally I wanted to talk about that, but I also wanted to talk about kind of how, when we're coming to actually relieving the disaster, how it's still a transfer of wealth from the regular working people, the people who have I think it's like the bottom percentage of this nation has like 50% or some shit. 50% has 1%. I don't know. I'm driving. Cut me some slack. No, but basically the people who don't have consolidated wealth are out here donating supplies, donating time, donating money. So that's our regular working people class having to foot the bill for an issue that's caused by the people with consolidated wealth, right? The climate issues, which isn't even just burning oil and fossil fuels. It's a lot more than just that, right? So all these ways, but the thing is all the ways are due to the activities of the people with consolidated wealth, who coincidentally are the people that our government is beholden to. So all of our policy pretty much reflects their interests, right? All our policy belongs, or I guess the only policy that exists in spite of the desires of regular working people. It's mostly by and for people with consolidated wealth, right? So because we get inadequate policy, we have to be paying for each other during these disasters that we didn't even have an executive decision-making role in. That was all the people with consolidated wealth and the people in the government. Those are the reins of the status quo. You see what I'm saying? And it breaks my heart extra because every time one of these disasters happen all over the world, right? Then we have to continue investing more money into just getting back to where things were. And that's money we could have invested into addressing the climate crisis in the first place. And it just seems like a very terrible trend that we're on, is that we know these storms are going to get more intense and more frequent. We know our policy is inadequate. We know every time this is happening, it's transferring more and more wealth upward away from our communities. We know that the climate crisis still isn't being addressed, despite, the taxes we're paying, whatever, etc. We know war isn't being addressed. We know our neighbors are suffering needlessly while all this is still happening. It's just this disgusting convergence of all these different things. And again, you follow it all back to the root. It's the people with consolidated wealth subjecting us to these violent outcomes, right? Because that's violence, man. People are dying. People are suffering. If you or I went out there and did something that ended up with 200 people dying, that we would be held criminally accountable, right? Or at the very least, they would have taken away the ability for us to continue doing it. But that's not what happens with regard to the climate crisis. In fact, not only does our policy not hold them accountable, but in some cases we materially reward them for this. So our neighbors getting murdered because of irresponsible policy results in material gain for these people, right? Not to mention, the murder of regular working people all around the world who are way more like you and I than they are like the people making the executive decisions to insist on war being a valid avenue to solving problems. You see what I'm saying? Those people that these bombs are falling on are regular working people just like us. They got the same incentives. They got themselves, their families, friends, neighbors, community, and the environment that they live in. And that's pretty much it. That's their world. And that's our class, right? Is regular working people internationally. But our ruling class is not comprised of anyone from that class with that set of incentives. And that's exactly the root of this issue, is that we don't have a seat at the table making executive decisions in a meaningful way. We have to go join their status quo if we want to do that, right? And their status quo don't have those incentives that we have. Theirs is on a commitment to the line growing, the GDP, getting returns on investment, keeping up with, or the money supply keeping up with interest on the debt, all that bullshit. The contrivances. Stuff that insists on itself in the face of a climate crisis that isn't going to matter too much once we can't grow food or can't live because the biosphere has been so far disrupted that we just can't sustain ourselves anymore, right? Like, the reality of this situation is people have already been dying from the climate crisis for years now. We should have been held these people criminally accountable. And we can't even begin to start holding them accountable until we have policy that allows us to do that, right? So I feel like, I wanted to hop on here and talk about that with y'all today, talking about how we can win policy, because, that's basically been all of history, right? It's like regular working people versus the systems they're beholden to, and them fighting and dying to get wins, right? That's why we got a weekend. That's why we got a 40-hour work week. That's why we have labor protection pretty much in general, right? And that's why we got the New Deal, right? Our country was damn near about to fall apart in the 30s. Shame it didn't, but it didn't. They got concessions. Regular people got some concessions back then because they were organized. They had the ruling class scared of them. Right now, our ruling class is so not scared of us that they will perform a genocide in our faces while we don't have adequate food, housing, education, etc. You know what I'm saying? It's blatant now. They used to at least dress it up in the past. Obama, they pretended like he was going to make some real valuable change. They pretended the wars were justified back then. Now there's nothing. Now they'll lie straight through their teeth saying that, we're working on a ceasefire. Just like they're working on the climate. Just like they're working on, economic justice. They're fucking not. They're leaving people out to dry, and they're laughing all the way to the bank because their incentives are different than ours, so they could give a rat's ass if we live or die. And that's our neighbors, man. That's people we love. That could be people we love any day. Last year, tell me how many people thought that, the mountains would be flooding, right? That could happen wherever the fuck, man. And it has happened all over the damn world. People have been losing people they love for the sake of a handful of wealthy, obscenely wealthy people to just be able to continue being that much more wealthy. They already got every damn thing they need, but they have to keep killing people just to keep their position in society. That's sick, man. That's some shit we should be holding them criminally liable for. Because why the fuck wouldn't we? You feel me? People are killing people. What the fuck's going on? People are engineering the genocide. What the fuck's going on, right? That's why we got these student encampment movements and all these big protests, because it's like, yeah, we know it's daggone wrong. But that's the next step, is getting that policy to get the law to reflect that it is wrong. And that's why I want to talk to y'all, because we got avenues to do it. Like I was saying, we study the...
In 2 miles, use the right 2 lanes to take exit 16 for US 1 North toward Wake Forest.
You study the Great Depression and how we got the New Deal out of that. Or we could study some contemporary things. I think the best way to do it is to organize our labor in our communities, build up that dual power, lay the groundwork for a general strike, and we force them to give us some concessions in the form of legal repercussions for all the people involved in this genocide and war profiteering, all the people involved in perpetuating this climate crisis that didn't never even need to happen in the first place. None of these people that died needed to die, man. That's the thing. So we need retribution, right? We need these people to be held liable, and then also on a path for restoration, not further nosediving into oblivion, because that's what these people at the reins have us doing right now. We are on an unsustainable path. We are on a path to species termination, right? All our hard work has ended us up in a situation...
In a half mile, use the right 2 lanes to take exit 16 for US 1 North
where
Wake Forest.
Where our ruling class is so irresponsible that they are just fine letting people die just so they can stay at the top. It's like some fall of Rome shit. For real. It's long past time that it has collapsed, right? It's been unjust
use
forever.
Use the right 2 lanes to take exit 16. Then use the left 2 lanes to turn slightly left onto the US 1 North ramp.
This business in Palestine is, just
use the left 2 lanes to turn slightly left onto the US 1 North
It's just the most recent example of the force that is required, and the unjustified murder that's been required to uphold this system. Like, look at Central America, South America, look at all over Asia, all over the Middle East, what the status quo is required just to give us a little bit of comfort. But really, we're having to bust our ass all the time. All the wealth we're producing is funneled up to the top 10% to be consolidated, and then what's done with it? It's sat on. It's not used to better people's lives or to address these problems that could end life as we know it on Earth. How is that not criminal, right? You feel me? Like, how is that not something that with the stroke of a pen tomorrow our leaders are not like, all right, guys, we had a good try, we tried it. Neoliberal capitalism turned out not working. But nope, that's what got them rich, and they'd rather stay daggone rich. So anyway, yeah, I was saying, please do check out the Black Socialists in America's website. They have a lot of cool material on building dual power and what that looks like and means. Cooperation Jackson in Mississippi is a really great real-world example of that. Honestly, all the old Black Panther literature is really good. Like, there's a reason the police went after those people and, murdered them just for speaking. Talk about a free country, yeah. No, but they were persecuting those people because they were right. Right? They were persecuting them because they were materially challenging the status quo and posed to really do it in a way that would disrupt the status quo as it stood then, which is just the same as now. Like, even all the way back in the Korean War, those people were dying for Wall Street. It was not for any just cause. Anyway, though, Yeah, it just bothers me a lot when we're talking about relief that we're just relying on the government just to do what they're supposed to do, because they never really have, right? They've just done what they could get away with at the minimum. And then regular working people have been having to foot the bill, right? Charities have been having to foot the bill for the inadequacy of the status quo. Because the reality is, it leaves people behind through no fault of their own, even without natural disasters, right? They were saying the zip code is the biggest determinant of how the rest of your life is going to play out, right? Nothing to do with the individual. It's this systemic failure. And then you sprinkle in economic crisis, which is guaranteed to keep happening, you know, whether it's something like 2008 or whether it's like what happened with coronavirus, you know, internal or external, is going to keep happening. And then you have these natural disasters in there too, further messing shit up, right? So why don't we have policy to reflect that? Why don't we have, you know, at the bare minimum, accountability, and, you know, really at the bare minimum too, sustainability, resilience, you know, investing all this daggone money into actually helping people instead of perpetual war that don't need to be happening, right? Because climate stuff's global. We need global cooperation. And our government's acting like a bunch of assholes like they always have, right? That's a conversation for another day, but I mean, you can look into the way they behave on the global stage. And I just wanted to talk about that, just, you know, because, you know, with regard to the last couple of years, like, you know, they should have completely lost all legitimacy, especially with regard to how they keep funneling Israel money and blatantly violating our own laws and international law when they're doing that. You know, completely forsaking the most vulnerable communities around the world with the climate, completely forsaking our own people with coronavirus and the way that...
There's a speed trap ahead.
Oh my. But yeah, you know, completely forsaken people that need help. Again, or help. 1 in 4 people, 1 in 4 deaths in the country are attributed to poverty. In the richest nation in the history of the world. When all that wealth is concentrated in 10% of people. Like, what the hell? Everyone's like yammering on about fearing big government or fearing authoritarianism or fearing communism. And it's like, wait a minute. So is consolidating all the wealth and power amongst 10% of people that don't live in our communities, that aren't even subject to the law, better? Is that not worse? You know? Like, that's literally why communism, or efforts toward communism, and like socialist states began, is because they were looking at that shit and were like, hey, this is fucked. Let's not let this happen legally. And there you go. You know, maybe there were some failures. At least they were trying to move away from a system that is a guaranteed termination for the species, you know? Or guaranteed 1 in 4 deaths attributed to poverty. And that's just in our own country. Imagine the whole rest of the world being subject to U.S. imperialism or Western imperialism, you know? Think of all the lives swallowed up by that, unjustly. And that's, you know, and all the ecology too. The ecology and lives. Things that are truly not replaceable, that are more valuable than any dollar amount. Can't never get them back once they're lost, right? You know how long it takes for a forest to become a forest? You can't just scientifically innovate a forest. You know, this is just time. That's pure time. So, I'm just saying, like, the status quo seems way up its own ass. And, you know, it's time we recognize that and adjust our lives accordingly so that we can have lasting justice. Because we're going to need it, right? Otherwise, we're nosediving. Otherwise, we're like the last generation of people that will know what life on Earth was. That's not exactly a great prospect, you know, especially if you're trying to raise a family or, you know, like animals or like plants or You know, like yourself. I would hope you would. Like your friends and family and your neighbors. You know, it's like, what the hell? Because this current status quo is at odds with those things. And I really want to drive that home. Like, Democrat or Republican, both of them are neoliberal capitalists. That's all they can do, is be at odds with them. We have a system that is at its core at odds with those things. So why the hell is it allowed to perpetuate? And why is that not illegal? You know? Like, obviously you know why, because the people with the consolidated wealth that the system's working for are the ones making the laws. But that's what I'm saying. We need to pressure these fuckers so we can make some laws. You know, get some laws for us. Because it's not impossible. They did it in the 30s without the internet. We could do it. And we do it. You know, there's victories here and there. So I just wanted to encourage everybody that, like, you know, it's not a fight that we have lost yet. It's things we have lost that we can't get back, and that's tragic. And that should be all the more reason for us to fight, right? Because if it's not us today, then it might be tomorrow. It might be our loved ones tomorrow. You know what I'm saying? And besides, we shouldn't even have to think of other human beings as being our loved ones to care about their prospects as, you know, humans being able to live at the bare minimum. It's like, why the hell have we allowed, you know, the broader status quo here? Why have we allowed it to shape our thinking that, you know, a genocide is remotely acceptable? Why didn't we shut this shit down day one? You know, that's a spot where we have to examine some things. You know, not to mention with South America, Central America, all this stuff, not to mention, you know, I didn't even mention you know, stuff with the police and like how we finance the police don't even address crime, really. They respond to crime after it happens, right? We don't get investment for the root causes of crime, but they'll invest in the police to be, you know, because that's what keeps force in the state. It honestly is like, if they really address crime, they would become obsolete, but then they can't justify their budgets no more. So they keep people in these precarious situations which incentivize crime. Our communities suffer, the victims suffer, right? And then the perpetrator themselves suffer by having to be in that situation in the first place, right? We're not addressing stuff at the root. Same deal with the climate. You see what I'm saying? It's all the same shit with neoliberalism. We can't address stuff at the root. We legitimately do not have the avenues to do it with this establishment. That's why we got to organize, because when the state doesn't represent you anymore, there's no democracy, and there hasn't been for some time, and it's, you know, is it demonstrable? Demonstratable? I don't know how to say that word. But you can look and see. You know, we haven't had it. So what do you do when you don't have democracy? Do you just sit on your thumbs and wait for the world around you to go to shit and everyone you love to suffer needlessly? Or do you get with your neighbors and fucking act so that less people that you love will fall through the cracks? You see what I'm saying? Like, we're in a pivotal time, instrumental time, extremely important. We can't just be like, oh yeah, the government will handle it, because they can't. They have no incentive to do it, and even if they did, there's no avenues within neoliberal capitalism, because there's no solutions that are acceptable that threaten capital accumulation. That's really the root of it, is the people who are hell-bent on capital accumulation, on that GDP line growing, don't want to entertain anything that would threaten the growth. And it's a failure of imagination that's going to be the end of history and the end of the human race and life on Earth as we know it. Right? There's no reason things need to be like that. That's a lie they're telling us, to be complacent with our communities being subject to these violent outcomes. Right? And again, why are these people allowed to lie to us like that? These are lies that cost people their lives. And they're not ever held accountable, and in most cases rewarded, right? And this has been happening all the time. If it ain't with regard to hurricanes and, the warm oceans and the climate, think about poison in communities, like with regard to like extractive industry. Here in our own nation, all around Appalachia, or all throughout South and Central America, you can look up Stephen, I don't know if his name is Donziger, I don't know how you say it, but Stephen that. Look up his case with I believe it's with Chevron, right? These companies have always been putting their bottom line before the well-being of humans. Because, a company is inherently sociopathic. It's a machine, right? It's not a thinking, feeling person that can account for things. All it can account for is that line going up? And due to the tendency of the rate of profit to fall, and, these various crises that I mentioned before, internal and external.
In a quarter mile, turn left onto Clear Springs Drive.
These companies have a material incentive to engage in these unscrupulous kind of tactics that hurt people. There's an incentive for them to do the wrong thing, and for our friends and family and neighbors to be subject to violence, right? Isn't that a messed up society? Shouldn't we do something about that? If the government is okay with that, shouldn't we, try? That's what I think. So I wanted to mention that to everybody. If y'all, sit through my fucking sermon here, it's daggone 30 minutes now. But thank you. I appreciate taking the time to hear it out. And if y'all want to discuss avenues to addressing this stuff, we can find one that works for you, that works for your community. That's another positive thing, even though there's so much negative. The positive is that this thing's like a quilt, right? The status quo. So you pull at a thread from somewhere, someone else is pulling at a thread from somewhere. We can unravel this shit and replace it with something that works for all people, that's really rooted in justice, and not our people being poisoned for bottom lines, or sacrificed for bottom lines, or ran into the ground on a global scale for the bottom line. There's more creative solutions available than what neoliberal capitalism can offer us. And I refuse to be spending the rest of my life sitting on my hands waiting for the establishment to run me and the people I love and the environment into the ground, just so that some guy that I'll never meet, who's already obscenely wealthy, can be a little that much more wealthy. That makes sense. At all. It should be condemned completely. And that's what organizing does, is saying no more of this. Anyway, yeah, thanks. I'm going to go ahead and hop off now. So appreciate y'all. Best wishes as we move forward. For real, holla at me if y'all interested in this stuff. We should figure it out. Godspeed.